Hello, this is Cassie Lindquist, LTSS Program Specialist for Adult Protective Services. The purpose of Adult Protective Services encompasses a wide array of services which provide short-term crisis intervention to stabilize and safeguard an elder or an adult with a disability. If necessary, more restrictive services can be provided for the long-term safety of the individual. The consumer who requires intervention from APS may have been living in their environment for their entire life, or the current situation may have recently developed. Ultimately, consideration for intervention is up to the consumer, as long as the consumer is capable of making their own decisions. Eligible persons are elders and adults with disabilities. The definition of elder is a person 65 years of age or older. And an adult with a disability is a person 18 years of age or older who has a condition of intellectual disability, infirmities of aging as manifested by organic brain damage, advanced age, or other physical dysfunctioning to the extent that the person is unable to protect himself or herself or provide for his or her own care. There's basic principles for adult protective services. Freedom of self-determination over safety. Consumers have the right to refuse service, make bad choices, or be eccentric. Adults have the right to personal choices until such time as they delegate this responsibility or the probate court appoints an alternate decision maker. APS cannot remove a person from their home against their will or force them to accept help. Participation in decision making. Adults have the right to receive information to help them make informed decisions and to participate in making decisions which affect their situations. Least restrictive alternative. APS should be provided with as little disruption to the consumer's life as possible. Whenever possible, consumers should be helped to live in the environment of their choice. Alleged victim is the primary consumer. The community, family, and friends' concerns about safety, crime, or finances are secondary to the consumer's needs. The APS workers should be sensitive to family conflicts, as there are times where families can be the problem rather than the solution. Protection is a shared community responsibility. It is essential that community agencies such as mental health, home health agencies, hospitals, domestic violence shelters, senior centers, community support providers, etc. work together to improve the lives of adults who have been abused, neglected, or exploited. Confidentiality. Adults have the right to privacy. This includes both the legal and policy requirements for confidentiality. The types of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. These are the types that we document in our system. Abandonment, abuse, material or financial abuse, exploitation, neglect, psychological emotional abuse, self-abuse, self-neglect, or sexual abuse. Intake. Upon receipt of a report of abuse, neglect, or exploitation, the LTSS specialist must gather information regarding the following. Urgency of the report. Nature of the report. Is it exploitation, abuse, immediate danger? Does immediate danger exist? Demographic information on the alleged victim, as much as we can gather. Some cases come in where we do not get much of that, but for sure we would need a name and an address to be able to follow up. Detailed report of the concern, witness or collateral contacts, is there family, does the individual have a guardian, etc. Demographic information on the referring party, that is if the referring party does not wish to remain anonymous. And then if there is a perpetrator, if it's not self-neglect or self-abuse, who is the perpetrator, and as much information on that person as possible. Information regarding APS investigations is confidential and results will not be shared with referring parties. However, the referring party may receive an acknowledgement of the report. So the reporting categories: a report of a life or health threatening condition. When making a referral to law enforcement in these cases, you will need to fill out the law enforcement template that can be found on your P drive. The process for filling out the law enforcement template will be provided on a later slide. There are a couple examples of these situations included in your manual. Examples that would go to law enforcement are physical abuse, domestic abuse, sexual abuse, danger to self or others, or threats of serious injury or death by a caretaker. These situations do require that immediate action and immediate notification to law enforcement. When a report in which a life or health threatening condition does not exist, such as reports of medical noncompliance, inadequate attention to physical needs, or intimidation by a caretaker, exploitation of resources, and self-neglect, that collateral contacts must be made within 72 hours of the report, and a face-to-face contact with the alleged victim must be made within 7 business days. If the result of collateral contacts is referral to law enforcement or another appropriate agency, then LTSS may not have to make that face-to-face visit. These are all case-by-case situations. A report of abuse, neglect, or exploitation of an adult with a developmental or intellectual disability. Depending on where the incident occurred will depend on the APS process. If the incident occurred at a community support provider, then they are required to complete a critical incident report, or a CIR, to the Division of Developmental Disabilities. A mandatory report to law enforcement, LTSS, or state's attorney is required when abuse, neglect, or exploitation is suspected. LTSS will verify with that Department of Human Services DD program specialist has received the report and follow up appropriately. If the alleged victim is not receiving any services through the Department of Human Services Developmental Disabilities, then LTSS will make a referral and follow up on the allegation appropriately. These cases may include referrals to law enforcement, referrals to DD, and or an APS visit depending on the report and the collateral information that is gathered. Reports of exploitation. The case may need to be referred to law enforcement, and if it is regarding a scam, those reports need to be reported to the Attorney General's Office of Consumer Protection. If the individual is competent and capable of making decisions, the person can choose to do what he or she wants with his or her money and assets. It is important to educate individuals and their families of the qualifications of Medicaid for long-term care purposes and the possibility of a transfer penalty in the future. The process for a conflict of interest is listed on this slide. Just like the other information for the presentation, this can be found in your APS manual. There are different steps depending on what type of conflict might be involved, and please refer to your manual regarding these situations. Personal safety. LTSS specialist personal safety is a priority, and when a report of guns, drugs, or a violent perpetrator at the consumer's residence is received, please follow safety protocol. Do not go out alone. If needed, request law enforcement to accompany you. And if we're not able to go out, then request law enforcement to complete a welfare check. And if at any time you are providing a visit and you don't feel comfortable, please remove yourself from the situation and follow up appropriately in the future. Always trust your instincts and use common sense. Assessment and investigation. The primary focus of the investigation: decide whether the eligible adult has been abused, neglected, and/or exploited. Decide whether self-abuse or self-neglect has occurred. Assess the risk potential of the eligible adult in the future. Decide whether services are needed by the eligible adult and whether or not they want to accept those services. perform a mini mental, and the mini mental status exam can be found in your manual, and the APS assessment is within SAMS. This is a copy of the law enforcement template. Anytime LTSS is making a referral to law enforcement, they must fill out the law enforcement template that is found in the P drive under General Documents, Information, Long-Term Services and Supports, LTSS form letters, and it's by office, and it is titled LE Report Template. The template is designed for you to be able to tab through the sections. If information is unknown, either leave it blank or type unknown. Each office has their own template and should be utilizing the one that has their letterhead on it. The directions on filling out the template can be found in the same folder entitled LE Template Directions. Per the directions, the completed form is emailed to adultprotectioncomplaint@state.sd.us email address after it has been sent to the appropriate law enforcement agency. That email address goes directly to the APS Program Specialist and LTSS Deputy Director. So those reports can then be sent to the Division of Criminal Investigation within the Attorney General's office per statute. This slide shows the intake call section in SAMS. A new call record can be assessed by clicking the down arrow to the right of calls when hovering over calls in the navigation bar on the SAMS main screen. A new call record must be completed for all adult protection calls, regardless of whether or not the individual is already a consumer or not. ADRC outcomes, in red, are a key component of the call record. They indicate what happened as a result of the APS report. Below are appropriate ADRC outcomes to use when recording the APS call record. Information only, referral to Adult Protective Services, referral for law enforcement, referral for DHS services, or referral for Tribal Police Elder Protection Team, referral for Ombudsman Services, referral for Ombudsman Services, and referral for Adult Protective Services. During the intake call, you should complete the perpetrator assessment and include all information the caller can provide, unless it is a self-neglect or self-abuse case. To complete the perpetrator assessment, click Add New under the assessment area in green. Once the new assessment screen pops up, select Perpetrator Assessment from the drop-down and click OK. Complete the perpetrator assessment with the caller and include as much information as possible. If the caller cannot answer all of the questions, leave them blank. Be sure to save the assessment when finished. If an APS case is opened, the perpetrator assessment can be automatically included in the APS assessment. See next slide. This shows how you can incorporate the perpetrator assessment into the APS assessment. You must first open the perpetrator assessment and select Make a Copy, which is outlined in red. When the new assessment screen pops up, change the form file name to APS Assessment 3.0.afm and click Open. You will see if you scroll down to the Alleged Perpetrator section of the APS assessment, you will find the information from the perpetrator assessment already included. You can then add to that as more information has been gathered during your investigation. The APS call flowchart is listed on this slide and can be found in your APS manual. It gives you an idea of what type of call you're receiving and how to document it in SAMS. Adding APS care enrollment. This slide just shows where you can select the Care Adult Protective Services program and the care program application date, etc. This slide shows an active Adult Protective Services case. And then assessment and investigation outcome. There's types of outcomes of an investigation. You have a problem found, no problem found, or inconclusive. This slide shows the T codes or termination codes. The T codes are used when closing an APS investigation. If you have an APS follow along, then you use the regular termination codes. But anytime you are terminating an APS investigation, you must use the T codes. All the information regarding documenting APS and SAMs can be found in your SAMs training manual. Mandatory reporting. South Dakota law requires certain individuals to report knowledge or reasonable suspicion of abuse, neglect, or exploitation of an elder or adult with a disability. In these next few slides, we will talk specifically about two groups of mandatory reporters. Group 1 includes those individuals who are in the mental and medical health professions. Group 2 are employees or entities that have ongoing contact with an elder or an adult with disabilities. Group 1 reporters are listed on this slide. Examples in Group 1 include any healthcare professionals such as physicians, dentists, chiropractors, podiatrists, nurses, emergency medical technicians, social workers, healthcare professionals, psychologists, counselors, state, county, or municipal criminal justice employees, or law enforcement officers. Anyone in Group 1 who knows or has reasonable cause to suspect that an elder and adult with a disability is being abused, neglected, or exploited must report either orally or in writing to local state's attorney, local law enforcement, or Department of Human Services. The report must be made within 24 hours. Group 2 reporters have ongoing contact with elders or adults with disabilities. Staff members of long-term care facilities such as nursing facility, assisted living, community support providers, homemaker providers who provide services in the home setting, and victim advocates or hospital personnel are included in this group. Group 2 reporters who know or have reasonable cause to suspect abuse or neglect of an elder or adult with a disability must also report within 24 hours. However, these reporters will report to the person in charge of the institution or to the person in charge of providing services. The person they report to will report to the local state's attorney, local law enforcement, or Department of Human Services. Facilities are programs that are licensed or regulated by the Department of Health, nursing facilities, assisted livings, etc., or Department of Human Services. Community support providers will also follow procedures in place for reporting to those agencies. If a person who is mandated to report fails to do so, they are guilty of a Class 1 misdemeanor. Mandatory reporters who make a report in good faith are immune from liability. Voluntary reporting. Even if a person is not a mandatory reporter, they are encouraged to report reasonable suspicion of abuse, neglect, or exploitation of an elder or adult with a disability. Just as with mandatory reporters, voluntary reporters who make a report in good faith are immune from liability. This is the information through South Dakota Codified Law 2246-12 of what to provide. When people file a report, it is helpful for them to include the name, age, address of the adult, the reporter's name and contact information, names and addresses of the guardian or relatives or caretakers, names of the alleged perpetrator, any injuries, or any other pertinent information that will be helpful. Reporters may be contacted for more information. If the call comes in through the ADRC line and it is assigned to you, you may need to contact that reporter to get additional questions answered that you may have. If a reporter calls and asks to remain anonymous, we'll take the information, but then whoever's assigned the case will not be able to follow up with that caller. When a reporter calls in and it is not anonymous, a letter will be sent in follow-up to the caller to confirm the referral has been received. As always, with our line of work, information reported will be kept confidential and the outcome of the referral will not be shared. Again, we also do not let the person that we are visiting with know who made the referral to us. The next few slides are the South Dakota Codified Law definition of terms. Adult with a disability, a person 18 years of age or older who has a condition of intellectual disability, infirmities of aging as manifested by organic brain damage, advanced age, or other physical dysfunctioning to the extent that the person is unable to protect himself or herself or provide for his or her own care. Elder is a person 65 years of age or older. Caretaker, a person or entity who is entrusted with the property of an elder or an adult with a disability, or who is responsible for the health or welfare of an elder or adult with a disability, and who assumes the position of trust or responsibility voluntarily, by contract, by receipt of payment, or by order of the court. Exploitation, the wrongful taking or exercising of control over property of an elder or an adult with a disability with the intent to defraud the elder or adult with a disability. Neglect, harm to the health or welfare of an elder or an adult with disability without reasonable medical justification caused by a caretaker within the means available for the elder or adult with the disability, including the failure to provide adequate food, clothing, shelter, or medical care. Physical abuse, physical harm, bodily injury, attempt to cause physical harm or injury, or fear of imminent physical harm or bodily injury. Emotional and psychological abuse, a caretaker's willful, malicious, and repeated infliction of a sexual act or the simulation of a sexual act directed at and without the consent of the elder or adult with disability that involves nudity or is obscene. B. Unreasonable confinement. C. Harm or damage or destruction of the property of an elder or adult with disability, including harm to or destruction of pets. Or D. Ridiculing or demeaning conduct, derogatory remarks, verbal harassment, or threats to inflict physical or emotional and psychological abuse directed at an elder or adult with a disability. Some resources are listed on this slide. We have the brochure for abuse, neglect, and exploitation of elders or adults with disabilities. We have our website. The website for consumer protection is listed through the Attorney General's office. They also have an application on that site for assistance through consumer protection. And then we also have the Guardianship Establishment Program. We have one through LTSS, and then we have one through Division of Developmental Disabilities. Depending on the person that needs a guardian will depend on which application would need to be filled out. Ours would, for LTSS, the Guardianship Establishment application would be for those individuals that do not meet criteria for services through the Division of Developmental Disabilities. So those, especially Alzheimer's, dementia, somebody that maybe has a TBI after age 22. Any of those questions regarding guardianship establishment can be directed towards Cassie Lindquist, myself. We also have legal services for the elderly. There are 2 contract providers, East River Legal Services out of Sioux Falls that covers the eastern side of the state, and Dakota Plains Legal Services. Main office is Mission, but they also have other branch offices across the state, and they cover the western part of South Dakota. Eligibility for the legal services are individuals 60 years and older. That is the federal definition of elder, and this is federal monies through the Older Americans Act. And then legal issues must be recognized as a priority, and they do not do criminal cases. We also have a brochure out there available that explains the legal services for the elderly and contact information for those 2 contracts. Thank you.